The first arc of the new season of the Clone Wars is drawn to a close. Let's dive in.
How you get so big getting food of this kind?
Hello and welcome into this week's spoiler review for Star Wars The Clone Wars, Season 7, this final season. Today, the episode is Unfinished Business, but in fact, Unfinished Business is the finishing of business, as it wraps up the first arc at the beginning of the season, and I'm ready to dive in and talk about it with you guys. As I said, there will be spoilers beyond this point, so please be aware. Overall, I think this might actually be my favorite episode of the 4 that we got in this arc. I am a sucker for Jedi action, and the amount of Jedi action we got in this episode probably tips it over the second episode of the arc for me. But overall, I have to say the arc was really good. I mentioned last week that I think the third episode is probably the weakest of the 4. I still liked it a lot, but if I had to really hash them out, last week felt like more of an addendum to the second episode, more than its own story. However, this episode still also felt kind of separated, and it's weird to say that because it has the Bad Batch, it has all of the same characters, it's still dealing with Echo, so thematically it all connects, and yet it feels like the first episode has its own story, the second episode has its own story, the third goes to the second episode, and the fourth episode kind of has its own story, even though it's dealing with all of the same characters. Like, if this was a series that was only about the clones and we never had episodes about any other characters in it, it wouldn't even necessarily feel like an arc to me, which, again, it feels weird to say that because they're all on the same planets they've been on. Like, it has all of the pieces of an arc that you would have, and yet it just doesn't feel like one. And I don't really mean that as a critique. It's just kind of a strange thing. I don't know. I think this episode, along with 1 and 2, they do such a strong job of giving you a beginning, middle, and an end to whatever it is they're hunting down, whatever it is that they're looking for. And I think it just did that very strongly. That said, there was a story told between all episodes, obviously, and I think there was an overarching story in those 4 episodes that was done really well. And to find Echo again and to see where he ends up, to get to know Bad Batch and to kind of see them come around on some of the regs that they have met, and then even some of the just emotional beats with Anakin that we've seen, I thought was really strong. I'm going to get into that a little bit more at the end of the review when I talk about why include this in the final season, which is a question I'm seeing thrown about online quite a bit. Why would you pick this arc over others to add? And I want to address that, but I'm going to talk about the episode as a whole first. And then get to that at the end. So the episode itself, it opens up with Anakin and Mace and Obi-Wan discussing battle strategies for the planet and Axis and what they're going to do and how everything is going to come about. Basically, they're still struggling. Even though Echo is not in place to fight against them anymore, that still doesn't mean that they're actively winning. Echo shows up and is like, hey, I have an idea. We have a moment here between Echo and Rex, and I don't think it's one of distrust, even though we will see that between Echo and the Bad Batch. I just think it's one of worry that Echo is just recently back on his feet, and Rex probably doesn't want to lose him again or see him get hurt right away. But Echo is like, hey, no, I can do this. And then this moment made me really happy. The person who's like, hey, I want to hear what Echo has to say is Mace Windu. So I am a huge fan of Mace Windu. Back in the prequel trilogy, Yoda has always been my favorite character, but Mace was my second favorite. I'm a big Mace fan, and it's been kind of crazy for me lately because since then you have a lot of fans who really understand the prequel trilogy through the lens of the Clone Wars, and because of Mace's treatment of Ahsoka in her arc in the 5th season, there's a lot of people who've turned on Mace, and I understand. But, you know, I knew Mace for a long time before this show even started and read like a lot of his Legends material and whatnot. I've been kind of on this like quest to prove that Mace is just not a constant jerk all of the time. And so I'm just going to point out several awesome things that Mace Windu did in this episode. First being like, hey, I want to hear what the clone has to say. Mace Windu does not distrust Echo. He does not distrust Echo for being a part of the enemy's plans. He does not hold it against Echo. He's like, hey, if you can be useful, I want to hear what you have to say because I value you. And I just like to just point that out, that Mace is pretty cool in this scene. We see Echo use his droid arm here and at various points in the episode, which will become important for something that happens at the end. He uses his droid arm, pulls up a map, and comes up with this plan. He says, you know, if the Jedi go and attack this factory, that's going to be great, and then I and the Bad Batch can sneak onto this ship and basically I'm going to feed them bad strategy where they're expecting good strategy. Echo wants to do this because he feels like he really let down his brothers and the Republic by being helpful in the fight against them, which of course wasn't his fault, but I could also understand wanting to give back after doing something like that. The plan is a go, and so they all load up in a shuttle to head to the separatist ship. I'd like to point out that this shuttle looked really, really, really Imperial, which I think is an important thing to note here. We're at a stage where we're getting increasingly closer to Revenge of the Sith, and even in Revenge of the Sith, we're seeing a lot of Imperial-like stuff right away at the end of that movie, and so we're starting to see the transition into that kind of iconography in terms of what our ships look like. And that's just a small detail, but an important one. As they get ready to go, Tech is the first to kind of voice his concerns about Echo. They're not unfounded concerns. I mean, I care about Echo. I like Echo a lot. Echo's one of my favorite clones, but he did have his brain plugged into by a computer and was being used to do things against, he was forced to do things against his will for a long, long time. There's just no way of knowing whether or not the Separatists are still in his head just because he's unplugged from the computer, or that there might be some kind of switch that could flip. Especially if you're Rex and you remember the Order 66 arc with fives, and to see that clones could go haywire, there's precedent for that kind of thing. But Rex is continuing to trust Echo through it all, and that is the running tension throughout this episode. Is Rex just kind of having blind faith in his friend, or is Rex correct and everybody else is suspicious for no reason? When they're on the shuttle, we get a couple of smaller character moments that are really good. Again, we see Echo using his droid arm, which will come into play later. I like the line between Crosshair and Hunter and Regs think that we take risks in terms of the plan, and I think that also goes to something that gets set up for later in the episode. And then I also just like that Wrecker doesn't like the word stealth, and he's very upset at the word stealth. Echo is able to change the reading of what their ship looks like so that they're able to get up to close to the Separatist ship, and they sneak on and head to the swanky computer room. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan and Mace lead an assault on the factory. There's lots of fighting, everything. I mean, this was like Clone Wars action at its finest, and there's so many little things and cool moments that are going on. And I'm not even a big fan of Y-Wings, and I like to pretend like I have like a real strong problem with Y-Wings, but even then, like, their bombing sequence looked really cool. It was just, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that I feel like Clone Wars did so well, is these large scale battles. And you'd see big battles in Rebels or Resistance, but like Clone Wars is the height of seeing this type of thing. And that was really cool. We then cut over to Trench. Trench is asking for help from the algorithm, so he doesn't know that the algorithm has been stolen, that Echo is no longer there. Of course, this is done because Wat Tambor is trying to hide his loss at the end of the last episode. He doesn't want that kind of information to get out. He wants to save his own skin. Because of that, that's going to be a huge problem for Trench. Now, even though Tech is afraid of what Echo might do because he doesn't trust him fully yet, he does help Echo, and they're starting to work together as a team. Echo wants to send that information, but Tech realizes, oh, I need to reroute that information and make it look like your signal is still coming from the planet you were on, so that no red flags get raised. Otherwise, it's going to look like the message is just coming from the ship. Then we hit what is my actual favorite moment from this episode, which is when Obi-Wan and Mace go crashing into the factory, and they land with all of the suaveness of Jedi falling from the ceiling, and Mace is like, he gives this big rousing speech of, hey, I've killed so many of you, and you should lay down your arms, and we'll reprogram you to serve the Republic. And Obi-Wan's just flashing him this look of, really? Like, what are you doing, Mace? And of course it doesn't work, and the droids just start shooting at him. I thought that was so great. Like, to me, as I'm going through and pointing out the cool things that Mace Windu does, that's just such a Mace Windu moment. What other Jedi is going to, like, show up and say, hey, droids, here's your chance to throw down your weapons and join the Republic? And there's a lot of deeper things I could say there about Mace Windu and his relationship with the Republic, but to kind of keep on this episode and not turn this into a whole thing about Mace Windu, I'll leave it at that. But I just thought that was a really good moment, and it's just fun seeing Obi-Wan and Mace work together and to see how those two personalities work out, because we're so used to seeing Obi-Wan with Ahsoka, with Anakin, with Qui-Gon, with these people who kind of go off the rails, and then to see Obi-Wan with Mace, and it makes Obi-Wan the flexible character. It is just a dynamic shift I really enjoy. So it was fun seeing them team up as well. More clones show up, join the Jedi in their fight, and they're kind of holding their own. Meanwhile, Echo actually sends more droids to the area. This makes Hunter, Crosshair, and Tech nervous. Wrecker doesn't seem too concerned about anything going on in any way. But they're like, Echo, what are you doing? And Echo says his plan is to bring all of the droids into one spot, and then he can just overload the server thing in the building and wipe out all the droids all in one place. So this is the moment of having to trust Echo. Either Echo is brainwashed and still working for the Separatists and is just going to overwhelm the Jedi and get the Jedi, or get Anakin and the clones who are on the Separatist ship, they're like kidnapped, or he really has something up his sleeve and they're really going to work on it. And Anakin and Rex both stand by Echo, and I think it's important that both Rex and Anakin do this, and especially from a Jedi standpoint like Anakin, I think that helps sell it to Bad Batch. We cross-cut back to Mace and Obi, and I love this part where Mace is like explaining this plan to Obi-Wan, and Mace is like, I was told not to worry and that it was all a part of the plan, and Obi-Wan's like, this is my life. So again, I love that, and I love seeing Mace getting pulled into all of these shenanigans that our Star Wars family gets into. I don't know. But it works. The Jedi do get surrounded by even more droids, but Echo is able to overload the what's-its and does the thing where they all die. Kind of Phantom Menace style in a way. At this point is when Bad Batch is like, okay, we can trust Echo. Echo did the thing. And this is where things with them start to shift. Trench is confused about what's going on, how the algorithm could have failed, where this power surge comes from. He sends droids to go investigate, but he also has something else up his sleeve. There's this giant bomb in the factory that wouldn't just blow up the factory, but would take out most of the planet with it. And now they have to stop that. So Echo risks his life to stay in the computer system to try to figure out how to deactivate the bomb, and Mace runs right off to go find it. This is another really awesome thing that Mace Windu does, which is he doesn't send a bomb squad. He, like, as soon as someone's like, hey, we need somebody to go find the bomb and deactivate it, Mace is like, nope, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be the one that goes near the bomb and risks my life, and I'm not even gonna hesitate. I'm gonna do it. So Mace runs off to go find the bomb. Anakin, in typical Anakin fashion, can't sit still and runs off to find Trench. In the event that Echo can't get the disarm sequence for the bomb, maybe Trench will give it to him. Mace finds the bomb, but it turns out the bomb is ray shielded, so he's not able to physically get to the buttons, but that's not enough to stop a Jedi. This is one of those moments that was really fun for me, because as soon as the shield popped up, I was like, oh no, he can't get to it, but I'm like, but he could use the Force to hit the buttons, and wouldn't you know it, Mace Windu reaches out his hands and uses the Force to hit the buttons. Echo has started to find the key and is slowly but surely giving him the number sequence that he needs, but at that exact moment, Trench's people find Echo, and they send a surge back through the computer, shock Echo, and now Echo is out of commission and is not able to give him the last number in the sequence. It's at this point that Anakin reaches Trench, and this was a really intense scene. Trench is like, I'm not going to give you the sequence because Count Dooku would kill me for my failure. Anakin says, what makes you think I won't? And it becomes the classic, well, you're a Jedi, you wouldn't do it, and then Anakin proceeds to cut off Trench's mechanical limbs. Now, this is both horrifying because it's a Jedi doing this terrible thing. It presumably would cause Trench pain. He's definitely threatening Trench and putting him in emotional distress, and this is definitely not the Jedi way. However, Anakin does choose to cut off the robotic limbs and not the real ones, like the flesh and blood ones, which is not great. I mean, he's still doing this violent act, but I kind of think that he's still like on this side of the line a little bit, because he makes the conscientious choice to pick those limbs and not the good ones. But it's still really bad. At the end of the day, it's a really bad thing, and it's not a thing the Jedi should do at all. And you're getting the musical cues and you're getting the lighting cues to tell you that this is all just bad news bears in that scene. So Anakin is able to get the last number from Trench, walks off with a controller that will become the self-destruct controller for the ship, and he has succeeded, albeit not in the Jedi way. We go back to Mace. Obi-Wan is on the radio with him and is like, hey, you should get out of there if you can't disarm the bombs, and again, Mace Windu, being awesome, is like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to at least try. I'm going to at least put in the wrong number. Presumably, if he puts in the wrong number, it could make it worse, which is why he hasn't tried doing it. And presumably, he is waiting for everyone else to be off the planet before he does it, just so that if it does blow up, he doesn't take away all the people trying to evacuate with him. none of this needs to come to pass because Anakin calls in, gives him the number. Mace is like, this is awesome, the bomb is disarmed, and the day is won. But Anakin, Bad Batch, and company still have to get off the ship, and they're kind of running to make their way. Here we get this really cool sequence with Wrecker being a wrecking ball. He's just running down the hallways, plowing through droids. We then see Crosshair use this really cool trick where he can like throw deflectors on the wall and like shoot them, and then like the blaster bolt bounces through everybody down the hall, and there's just this funny competition where Wrecker's trying to be the coolest one, and then Crosshair outdoes him, and then Wrecker's like, dang it, he always outdoes me, and they have this kind of playful back and forth. They all meet up with Anakin, fly away, but Anakin lets Wrecker destroy the ship with the self-destruct button, and it was a really funny moment because Wrecker is just like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever done. The Bad Batch guys in general are all really great. Everybody lands on the planet. Jedi say, hey, good job to all of the clones, and this hits the emotional beat of the episode. See, Bad Batch has come around on Echo, and they're like, hey, you're pretty cool, but you're also kind of weird now, and if you want to join us and be with weird clones, we would really welcome you. And this is kind of their arc of not trusting regs in general, not really trusting anybody other than maybe Cody in terms of other clone troopers kind of keeping to themselves, not trusting Echo because Echo was with the enemy, and then coming around and liking Echo, who started as a reg and then became unusual and is like, hey, come into our club. And so seeing their full arc there was really good. We see Rex, who's like, hey, Echo, you and I have been through a lot together, but if this is where you feel like you need to be, you should go. And that's a really big moment for Rex. He spent all this time trying to get his friend back, but at the end of the day is able to let his brother go if he has to. And I think that's a sign of just how healthy and stable Rex is, that he's able to do that. Even though it's clearly hard for him, we see that pained expression on his face, because Echo does decide to join Bad Batch. And I think this is a good place for Echo, and this is kind of what I was talking about with, you know, they keep going to Echo's droid arm and showing how he's different, and they made a point of that at the end of the third episode to show how Echo is different. And this is something that should be celebrated, but also something where he might not just be comfortable back in his old life. Even just joining in with his brothers, it's not just the physically looking different, but just the emotions and pain of what he's been through. He's probably going to be better off with people who are a little bit different. The other kind of callback, like I said earlier in the review, is when you have Crosshair and Hunter talking about, or maybe it was Tech and Hunter, anyway, you have Hunter talking about how, you know, people think, you know, regs think we do risky things. It's like, well, now they're kind of seeing Echo as more than a reg. And then at the end of the episode, they all salute Rex, which was really cool to see Bad Batch not only accept Echo, but then to show that respect to Rex after everything they've been through. Just all in all, a really good moment and a really good ending to a really amazing arc. Alright, so at the beginning of the review, I said I was going to talk about here at the end a little bit of why include this arc in the final season. See, I really like these episodes, even if I thought some episodes were stronger than others. And I've seen a lot of people talking really positively about these episodes, and I've seen some people who are like, oh, I'm on it, or they weren't my favorite, or some of them who didn't think the episodes were as great, or just some people wondering, like, why did we get these episodes when we could have gotten other ones? I understand all of that, and I can totally see why these episodes wouldn't be up, like, everyone's alley, why they wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. To me, one of the strengths of Clone Wars is that we have all of these different stories, that we have Jedi stories, and clone stories, and even droid stories, and some of the wackier, more kid-centric ones. And I don't think it was ever the intention that every fan would like every episode, but rather that there would be an episode for every kind of fan. And something like that is important. I certainly don't love every episode of the Clone Wars, but I love the Clone Wars, you know? And I recognize that the episodes I don't like as much are not really targeted at me, and that's okay. You know, there's a ton of these episodes to anybody who tried to do a rewatch before we got to this final season. There's a lot, and there's going to be some that work for some people and not others. And I will admit that when they announced Bad Batch as being a part of the final season, I was a little bit let down because these episodes did exist. They were seeable, even if they were only in story reel, and I selfishly wanted a different 4 episodes because I want as much Clone Wars as possible. And there are lists of, like, other unmade arcs that sound absolutely amazing that we're still not going to get to see in the Clone Wars, and that's too bad. But I do understand why this is a part of the final season, and I think that's important the final season isn't really about getting as much information out there as possible. If that's the goal, then they could still release these stories in other forms, and some of the arcs we haven't gotten could still be novels and comics, like we've gotten with other arcs, like Dark Disciple or Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. So just because it's not in this show doesn't mean we're never going to see it again. But I think what they wanted was to pick the arcs that explained and finalized the story arcs in the Clone Wars. And at the end of the day, in a show called The Clone Wars, the main characters are the clones. I understand that Anakin and Obi-Wan are there. I understand that Ahsoka is a very important, critical part to this show. But it's called The Clone Wars, and we're in this war of the clones, and the point of this series is to give us this context, and these clones are so important to the overall story of certainly the prequel trilogy, if not the saga itself. And it's okay if you don't like clone episodes as much. I'm not saying that you have to like them, but it makes sense that they're there, that we have these episodes that are just about the clones. Especially because the other two arcs that we know are coming are the Ahsoka Walkabout arc and the Siege of Mandalore. I think there's a lot of people who are understandably really excited for more Ahsoka content. Ahsoka is the other kind of new thing that came out of this show. She was the new addition to canon that came with the series, along with getting to know the clones. And I think she and the clones are both really, really critical, which is why you get Bad Batch, which is about the clones, it's about Rex, it's about Cody, it's about finding Echo, it's about seeing this individuality with the clones, and we're going to get Ahsoka's Walkabout episodes, which are about Ahsoka, and then you get Siege of Mandalore, which is going to be about the clones, about Ahsoka, about the Jedi, about the end of the war. You know, the Siege of Mandalore isn't a so-and-so's set of episodes, it's the finale. So we're getting an arc about the clones, an arc about the Ahsoka, which are the two big important things, and then we're getting the final. And that makes total and complete sense to me. But beyond being just about the clones, the Bad Batch arc was about Anakin. We saw Anakin in his interactions with Padme. We saw Anakin being a friend to Rex. We saw Anakin teeter closer to the dark side. These are all really important things. We see more of how the Jedi interact with the clones and how the Jedi find their way into the war. We see more with the Separatists, and Trench might not have been there from the beginning in terms of release order, but chronologically, Trench has been there from the beginning, and seeing his end was important to the show, I think. I get the argument, but I really feel like these episodes told so much, showed so much, and were critical to ending the story arcs that we had seen in the Clone Wars, and that's why they belong here. But those are my thoughts on this episode. Some more on the Bad Batch. We're planning on doing a streamcast soon, maybe next week or the week after. We have both Clone Wars and the Rise of Kylo Ren comic to talk about, so in some order we're going to be doing that soon. So we'll have more discussion about the Bad Batch in general, but for now, go ahead and leave me a comment telling me what you thought of the episode and episodes as a whole. If you're not already, please follow us on the socials, and until next time, keep it real and fly casual.
Cooking can be fun.